Hi, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. If you are, thank you guys for being here. This is the November 2nd Norwood Cultural Council meeting, our monthly meeting. And we are going to jump right into the agenda this evening as it has been shared and posted. There is just probably one change to that that was shared out before a few things changed for our council. And that is that we won't be voting tonight. We won't be beginning the grant voting. We're going to talk about how we're going to approach that voting, but the cycle has been moved back and we got that notification from the Massachusetts Cultural Council. So the fourth item on the agenda will look a little different. Shalon, do you have anything to kick things off or anything pressing or questions or anything or?
Sorry, I was muted. I will try to do this. So I took a look and we have gotten a couple of more cancellations. I've submitted some stuff and it looks like we have a total of 4 outstanding grantees that have postponed till the spring. So so we can, touch base with them as needed. We had 3 that had already canceled their events. And then it looks like we have 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, looks like 10 grantees still outstanding that we haven't heard from. So I can, well, some of them are multiple grantees, but 10 programs that we haven't heard from. So we can just touch base with them, see what their plans are over probably the next week. So after this, I'll try to send out or maybe tomorrow, an email to those 10 grantees since I have their emails saying just also to find out if they've sent their stuff in. We're not checking now that the town hall's open, we can go and check the mail more often. Haven't seen, we had some stuff in the email and those got delayed. So, but those have all been submitted. So hopefully those checks will be out this week. So that's $977 that was from canceled grants. So that can be rolled over into the allocation for this year. We've gotten the $2,000 from the town. So that is in our budget. And it looks like we have in total grant money $5,344 remaining to pay out. So so that's kind of where we stand money wise. And then I just need to find out the information about expenses for the kite project. So I just need those expenses to add in to here, but but it's all ready to go.
Awesome. I have 2 things. If I'm not sure if others have questions, but I know Denise has a reimbursable for you. I think she needs to ask you for a W-9. And then the other thing was, we talked about this a little bit at the last meeting, for people who are canceling and just saying they're giving up their funds, that's one thing. We were going to let people know that they could keep their funds, but then they would need to let us know they would need to let us know if why they use them, so that we could then consider them if they apply again next year, right? Because I think that's what I was sort of gathering from all the pieces I could gather, that we let people know that the funds are still available, even if they can't necessarily do their program, but they need to let us know why. Like, is it for operating costs or whatever? And then is there a way, Shalon, to note or carry over, once we set up our sheets for in a few months for that, in a couple of months to vote, to note what people did? Maybe we can add a column or something. And I know we're going to talk about how we look at those in a little bit, but do you think maybe, and others can tell me what you guys think too, but let's add a what did they do last year column, just so we can reference that as we're looking oh, they had to change it, or oh, they just canceled flat out, so we didn't give them anything, because we probably want to know that. Or they kept it because they're really in bad shape and they needed it, and now they're going to apply again, but they're going to do this thing. Somewhere to have that so we can reference. And is there anything else about that that you are still concerned about, Shlanj?
Oh, there it is. So I did get some clarification on
Okay.
what we can do. How we allocate money for next year is depending on our priorities, whatever we want to do. If we want to take special consideration to those who canceled, we can do that on our own. For anyone who has canceled, so if there are any if there are any programs that are just not going to take place, I did get some clarification on that from Timothea, that we can't just give them their grants regardless. So I think there was some confusion whether we could just give them the grants anyway, even if the program didn't take place. What we can do is, even if the program was canceled, if they incurred costs based on that. So like, for example, if the schools had a non-refundable deposit, or if they had a booking fee or something like that, that they incurred a cost, but the program was canceled.
Okay.
Same thing with the artists. If the artist had, booked travel that couldn't be reimbursed, or, different things like that, time, if they had already allocated their time for it, and then that was like wages lost, we can reimburse for that. They just need to submit something to us about what costs they have already incurred because of that program. Even if it was canceled, then we can still reimburse them for that. So if they are not going to have the program regardless, it's not going to be postponed, and they would like to just cancel it altogether, and the remaining money would go back into our pot for our next grant. But we do need to get those decisions before we allocate the funds. And now we have a little bit more time, now that the grant cycle's been pushed out, to figure out our allocation. So that gives us a little bit more time to get those answers from people, because I know some of them are trying to reschedule still, but haven't been able to.
Okay, that makes a ton of sense. I wonder if you and Amy want to put your heads together on how to do a reach out to everybody that's still on the list, so that you can get that information, so you're not waiting on it. You know what I mean? So that okay. Does anybody have any questions for Shlanj about the report? She's saying we have around 5,300 minus to pay out. Sorry. Minus the, I'm sorry, I think I'm messing that up. Minus the kite expenses, but 5,300 is what's remaining of grantees from last year, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so,
Yes.
and then as far as our funds all together, including the money from the town from last year, we have 5,600 left in our pool, but 2,000 of that will be allocated towards grants next year. So so that leaves us 3,600 in our accounts.
Okay. Okay, so I was just going to move on to the MCC updates. Hopefully you guys are getting the emails from Timothea and can have read the most recent one, which is, I'm just going to read from this, that the grant cycle has been pushed back to have the deadlines close at December 14th instead of November 16th. And we can now, then we would be able to access the panel books starting on the 15th through the 3rd. So we need to have our voting meetings in January and February, with the last day to send denial letters being mid-February, and then the annual report being March 1st. So everything got pushed. And then the other big takeaway, if you clicked on the LCC grant extension letter information and read through that, there was an encouragement for those who haven't, for those local councils who haven't, to reevaluate priorities and take this opportunity to do more outreach to communicate those priorities if they changed, and to take the extra time to let people know that these things are going to be available. The other big headline is just that they still don't have a budget approved. The state hasn't, they keep doing the monthly holdovers. And so the final FY21 budget hasn't been approved. What we do know is that the governor allocated 16.3 million from the state. So and that went down from 18.2 million. So given COVID, they were happy that it wasn't less, you know, that the funding was for the arts and cultural sector didn't really go, that he still kind of prioritized it. But my point being that we know that Mass Cultural Council got a significant amount less. And so I would expect, I guess, that our allocation would be less. So that's just to keep in the back of our minds as we start to talk about how we want to do our voting assessment and criteria, because what I'd like to do, Deborah was really helpful. She helped, we kind of talked about this at the end of the last meeting, because the last 2 years, we took a couple of different approaches. And this year we're going to have to take yet another approach, but we can talk through like what we've done and then what we think we're going to need to do given sort of some of the unknowns and some of like what we think we can anticipate people will be applying for, et cetera. The only other thing that I wanted to say about the priorities was that if you saw in the slideshow that we kind of added as a protective measure on our last slide that pertained to Norwood, this sort of like asterisk, COVID asterisk, which was like, we left our priorities in because we didn't have time to, the timing was weird on that. So we left that in, but we just did an asterisk that was following the lead of Mass Cultural, which was like, you know, allow consideration for people who are applying for things that are impacted by COVID. So we weren't going to consider, you know, require venue requirements in the same way. And we're going to look at operating costs maybe for people who are not necessarily even able to fund programming at this time, but like need just operational costs. So things like that we had kind of already covered. And I guess I would put to the group the question of whether or not we want to go back and look at those priorities and fine tune them even more given what's going on, or if we're okay with that and think that it covers it enough. Does anybody have any, you know, thoughts or questions about what we've gotten from Mass Cultural lately, or things I've missed?
Kate, where did you say those were posted?
So the last email from Timothea was on November. Oh, it was today, and so there should be
our changes.
Oh, our changes are posted in the slide deck that we sent out at the beginning of when the cycle opened. Remember, we sent that out to everybody, and then we emailed everyone and we posted it on our social media. And in there, you and Amy had worked on some of it, and then I basically added the language in the middle pertaining just to us with our criteria and priorities. I can resend it to you. But it basically has the priorities we did for FY19 from our survey, from our community survey. And then I pasted in the recommendations from the Mass Cultural Council regarding.
Okay, I'll just go and double check, because I had a question about something, but I want to make sure I read it quickly. So I can always come back to that question.
Okay, cool. Anything else, anybody else with anything spurred for you guys in terms of what we're getting from Mass Cultural? Or
so Kate, I have a question. Do the grantees, like the people that are applying now or, you know, have applied in the past, will they get notification that the deadline has extended, or is that something that I should send back out to like the schools, and then if I partner with Solange, the rest of the artists and the other groups? Do you want me to send something out regarding that? Okay.
Well, you could send to who you sent to, and then I could send to who I sent the slides to. And then if we keep thinking of, I mean, we can talk today about how to get, and then Mary Paz also send it to some people. So we should reshare it and give the new date information, and if we want to tweak the priorities at all. But like I said, that kind of, we covered that a little bit. But if we come up with any big changes of information, yes, we should sort of do another blast of that. I think they would see it. Deborah, maybe you could, I've only been in the,
When they apply, they will see the new dates.
that's what I was gonna,
Because the application link will be the same. And then
okay.
it also says the date that we'll respond. So that probably would be updated as well in the template.
Yes, that's great. I went in there, but I didn't look for like the dates if they had moved. So, that's good to know.
Yeah, it's only
But I
one complete application so far.
Yeah, for the Oldham.
Well, there were 3 for the Oldham that Julie put in as drafts. They don't have the budgets ready yet,
Pending.
but there was only one program from, I think, our dance place in Randolph was our only completed one to date. So I'm
Oh,
glad
okay,
that the cycle's extended because people are taking longer to get their apps in.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I was going to send out the deadline extension, but all of this happened in the last week with Winsmith Mills. And I know the artists are, none of us have our heads on right now
Right.
thinking about that stuff. And I
Right.
don't know that we will. So, but I will, after this week, because we need to get through this week, I will
Yes.
let people know.
Okay. And I wanted us to talk a little bit about Winsmith and how the Cultural Council came up in that discussion. But just, I thought maybe we could get through this agenda item first, just in case I missed anything. I know that, we get a lot from them, and also we're all got a million things going on. So I think that covers it before we sort of start getting into how we want to approach our voting meetings.
Sorry, Kate, I did find my question, and it was, I don't know. I think I was just a little confused because I don't remember this from the last call. Maybe it was the previous call that I missed. Was about more information about operating support. So what does that really entail? So if there's no programming, we're just allowing operating support? That I don't understand that. So if you could just explain that.
Yeah, and maybe that means we need to describe it better for people. So my take on it is that, say you are just for example, a dance studio that had to close and you would demonstrate financial hardship, and you would say, because I lost this much revenue for classes, I now am facing, I need to make my rent for the next blankety blank in order to function. And so, due to that, I'm asking for this support so that I can stay open and do this type of virtual programming. And I think it says something like describe the financial hardship, right? In one of the line items on that slide. But does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes more sense than the way it was written, because I don't remember seeing this slide, but I may have just glossed over it because maybe it was the final before it went out and I didn't want to hold it up or something like that. So so I just had that muted myself.
Yeah, but if you had the question, then maybe I'll go back and look and see, we may need to move that information. Maybe it's gapped or something, maybe it needs to be, the financial hardship piece should be closer to the description of the operational cost thing. I'll take a look at it.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure it wasn't perceived as they weren't going to offer any programming, and we would just give general operating support grants for that just because they were in Norwood. It really depends on the situation. And if it was going to have any benefit to any Norwood residents whatsoever. So your example is perfect, dance studio, that's what I would consider, an operating grant. but just wanted to
Okay.
have a little bit of clarification.
Yeah, and I think that another similar example that we might anticipate seeing is we weren't able to do our regular fundraising big events. But one of the things that, in fact, this is an example that was given to me. We would like to have an outside display at potentially at the Historical Society. But would that work? Because it's not, it is a public good because people can see it. But normally we wouldn't fund like lights, like that's not something we would normally do. But if they can demonstrate like, okay, our budget won't allow for this unless, and this is one of the things we can do in COVID, then we would discuss that and talk about it because it's in this context. And that is why this discussion of how to, I'm sort of segueing here. That's why this discussion of how to lump our categories and weight things is going to be a little trickier this year because some of it's going to be nuanced, Anything else before I can cross off this 150th thing really quickly. And of course, at any point in time, you guys can jump in if you think of anything, or if I forgot something. Just quick, and then we can talk about that sort of how we want to approach voting. So for the 150th, we had a meeting last week and nothing huge. There's still a lot of just governance questions right now, but we did have a subcommittee meeting for cultural stuff. Arati was there, and we're hoping to aim for like a cultural festival in the fall of 2022. And we are talking about the Space Center, but that all is to TBD in terms of confirming that. So those talks are being had by like folks in the town and owners and things like that, but it could be really cool. And then in our last meeting, we talked about doing the recipe social media blitz interactive thing that could potentially turn into something that would be like a fundraiser thing. But I think we should still plan it as we were in terms of a social media thing and then see how it takes off. That's it for that. Okay, so as I was just saying, Denise, did you join us via phone? I don't see my list
Yeah.
here.
I'm here.
Oh, good. Okay, hi.
Hi.
All right, so Deborah was really helpful. She sent an email that reminded me about the way we've kind of done things the last 2 years, and we'll be kind of not reinventing the wheel again. I think we can use what we've learned in the last 2 years to some extent, especially how we want to like organize ourselves. I'm hoping that we all kind of can look at the same type of spreadsheet and that sort of thing. We've grouped them in the past by categories such as like schools, seniors, I think library, and there was one other thing. I don't have it. And then the
And then we had artists.
individual artists, right? And
Associations like the Historical Society, library.
organizations, right. That was where the library was, yeah. To me, it makes sense that you would still kind of look at them in some broad categories, especially since we know, I think we know that we'll get a significant amount from the schools again. But in terms of breaking that down further and measuring our evaluation up to our priorities, which was like the goal where we wanted to get to, right? Like when we did the survey, and the aim was to get to that point where we could like have that weighted more in the discussion. I don't know if that makes sense right now, or I'm open to ideas on how you guys, has anybody else been thinking about this and want to throw anything out there in terms of how our voting meetings are going to go without knowing how much money we have or what grants, what applications we're going to get?
I guess I could just clarify to the team sort of what I was talking about with the priorities. For example, if we were comparing two applicants and one had a music component and one didn't, if you recall, based on our community survey, music component was something we called our priority. However, in our past voting discussions that I can recall last year, we never really took that into account and say, oh, well, we should fund them at 60% of what they asked for instead of 50 because it was a priority category. That's sort of where it was coming from. I'm not saying that we need to do it this time. I know that with COVID, our decision-making is going to be a little bit different, but that's sort of my train of thought was to say we have priorities, but the priorities, to my recollection, never came into account in our deliberations and in our calculations.
That's true. I think, Deborah, that was in part due to the fact that I think our priorities were publicized after people had, some people had applied, and we felt like it wasn't entirely fair, but, and so we didn't feel like we could do the comparison, you know, like, but yeah, that was the goal. I think
might not be the year to do it.
Yeah, and I think that can be part of the conversation. That's partly why even when we shared the slides for this year, we left those on there. But, you know, for instance, which of those things, music, diversity, and new artists, right, or new organizations, which of those things like lend themselves to virtual? I suppose, like, you know, it would be super exciting if a new artist wanted to do a public art thing, you know, and like that, like people could see outside and all of that. That would like get 4 stars, right? So should we sort of like create a point system or something? Like, oh, you get, you know, we give them a check for this and check for that, and then we can measure people. And should this year hardship be one of those categories? Do you know what I mean?
That makes sense to me, you know, to have it organized and then for us to have like the spreadsheet with the different categories and expectations at the top. And then, you know, when we're looking at the grants, to go across and say, okay, this is fulfilling this is, you know, addressing that. I think that makes sense.
So basically it'll be like a consumer reports, you know, what are those things in however many green dots or whatever, you know.
And then compare them, right? Choose A and B and see compare them.
Right. And I think the other thing, we can do that. And I think there will still be some where we'll be having discussions about it, right? Because like, I know schools might say, well, I know your priorities are this, but they'll make a really good case as to why a certain type of program is really relevant to their student population. Or, you know, we've left an opening for that to some extent. And also I think since our district isn't yet that competitive or as much, we don't get as many applications as we'd like, I think we have to make allowances for discussions. But I think it's good to add this as part of the criterion. Other thoughts on that? Adding like some like check mark slots for these as we look at them?
Yeah, if we can get like, I guess we can be a little bit more flexible this year just because, you know, it's COVID and there's going to be different circumstances for everything. And so we can look at it when they come in, but, and also it depends on what applications we receive. I fear a lot of artists won't be able to have programming unless they've adapted to online. And there's going to be a lot of programming that's just not possible. So, so that may be unfortunate. I also would like to find out about if I know we can't carry over funding, so we have to fund out the full amount. We could still, we still have the option, which we didn't actually know about last year, about conditional funding. So if someone, when we do the granting, if it's supposed to take place, say in June, and the restrictions aren't lifted, they can have another year, for example. So we can, you know, put timeline adjustments on there as well. So it will be more conditional based on, you know, the current environment. I would like to, I'm hoping that we get more applications because I know we funded seniors, all the senior programs last year 100%. There was a huge chunk of them that unfortunately we did dismiss because of not knowing the complete conditional grant purposes and stuff. But I would very much like to see the percentage of money that goes to either more local organizations or communities and relative to the schools. I know I always sound like I'm against schools, which I'm not. I'm very much for them, but it just needs to be in a more even way. And we gave 90% of our funding to schools last year. So that's, that doesn't really show and showcase our priorities very well, and supporting the community as a whole. So it always depends on what applications we see. Of course,
Right.
we got a lot of applications from the schools. There are ones who know about this that support all the time. So there's that. But I think if we had some kind of criteria, and in doing this, when we go through it, would be a lot more helpful. And also, we just have to be very careful. I know that a lot of us are involved in a lot of different things in the community. So I did also ask about conflict of interest information. It suggested that, we just create our own conflict of interest form so everybody can disclose what they're already involved in. We really need to base our voting on the merit of the applications and not on what we know because we're involved in all these different things in the town. Some of that can take it into place, but if someone is involved in something, they cannot vote. Those have been the rules all the time, and I think they've been a little loose in the past, but they can't vote on that grant at all, whether it can be granted or the amount of money they can receive. So if you're involved in an organization, you really have to disclose it. And I think it would be a whole lot easier if, we just had a form and everybody submitted their forms. So, and we just had it on
What's the
file.
last thing you said?
If we just had like a form or something I can send around, just a generic form that people can go ahead and disclose whatever they're involved in with the community. So that way we don't have to do that during the voting.
Okay.
So that's just a suggestion. We can even do it via email. It doesn't have to be so formal.
Yeah.
But we really have to base everything based on the merit of the application. So we just have to be really careful about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the person would just recuse themselves when we're discussing any particular application if they had an interest.
So just to be clear, I have a student, some of us have students at the schools, but we're not necessarily on the PTOs.
The schools are tricky. So I've asked for clarification on that. So I'm just waiting to hear back if it has to go that level or if it's just if you're on the PTO. It's kind of tough because then, you can look at it from 2 points of view that you have no say over the money that the school does, but then your child itself is going to be able to participate in that, but so is all the other ones. I think
Right.
It really only has to do with the PTO. Like if you're involved in the
Right.
PTO, then you couldn't, vote on that school's grants. I'm pretty sure that's it. I asked for clarification. I don't think it needs to go any further than that because if your kid is gonna go to a grant, sorry about my kid, by the way. If your kid is going to go to any program or benefit from any program, it's kind of the same thing. So I don't think we need to go to the level, like if your kid goes to that school, then you can't vote on that because you really have nothing to do with the grant application itself.
Right.
So.
It's interesting because where it's a small town to the extent that, somebody, just like somebody on the cultural council is going to have a kid in the schools. It's also, very much, just like anything, like a lot of the ways that we know things is through relationships or through being, on town meeting or, being involved in various volunteer organizations. And I think another conversation we've had about the schools is how, as a council, we're aware that not all the PTOs are funded the same and therefore have different amounts of money. But the reason we know that isn't because we have a formalized, well, we're trying to get back to that, where we have a back and forth with the schools, and COVID busted that up as we were planning our workshops. But we know that because of, the knowledge that we have from being members of the community. So that's something, so it's like, it's not black and white, but I absolutely agree that we want to make sure that there's not a conflict of interest. I just also know that in a town like Norwood, there's a certain amount of good faith knowledge, I'll call it. I'm coining that term, copyright, thank you. No, that is like, oh, well, we could ask so-and-so because we know that there's a background there or something. So it's good to question those things, maybe the information's old, maybe and I think we're heading in the direction of formalizing the relationship with the schools so that we can both give and get better information about what our goals are and all of that. Great. So I think we're going to add we're going to all be looking at the similar spreadsheet with broad groups, and we're going to create columns next to them that each of us can check off, what priorities they hit. And it'll basically be our priorities plus hardship or COVID related issues. And then maybe I'll just add one, Solange, up for conditional funding. That way we could, if any of us has a question like, oh, we should go back to them and say, like, clarify this more or something like that, we can check that off for later discussion. Does that work?
Yeah, that sounds like a great idea.
Kate,
Yeah.
can I just clarify the senior center and their grants last year?
Yeah.
We funded everything that they wanted us to fund. There were a couple that came from out of town. There were artists who wrote grants asking to come to the senior center. And when we went back to the director at the senior center, they did not want those artists. Because remember, we were trying to sort of figure out how this fit in there and if it would be a good fit for them. And so we went back and asked specifically about that. And they came back and said, we had that person in the past. We didn't like him, rubbed someone the wrong way kind of thing. And so
Yeah.
we did our best to respect what the senior center actually wanted, not what someone from outside wanted.
Yeah. I do remember that with one. And then I remember one that maybe Solange was thinking of where like, maybe we could have gone back to her and said like the olive oil lady or, and we could have said, well, if you tweak it, then, cause I think they were interested in her, but like it meant had nothing to do with our stuff. But if we would have gone back and said, well, if you can bring like a literature so that might have been, but yes, I do kind of remember that other one where somebody was like, yeah, we don't want that person. So,
Right.
Yeah.
But see, so in that case, I would think something, and this is just my thinking in my head, that in that case, we're not going back and asking about all of the grants. So, they did not have a relationship with the senior center. They didn't have an agreement with them to come back yet. But if we liked the program, we could still fund it, that they had to find a different community partner. It may not take place at the senior center, but if they did not get that community partner, say, they did something on the town green or somewhere
Yeah.
else in Norwood, that it could still be funded, just not with the senior center. So that's the condition, that they do need to have a Norwood partnership in order to bring in that program.
Yeah,
If
there were a lot of
senior
those.
center- Yeah, the senior center could definitely say, no, they don't want them. And then there's no partnership there. And then they would have to get a partnership somewhere else. If they didn't, then they would forfeit the grant. So basing our decision just on the fact that this program didn't like them, then that individual didn't get any funding, where they might have found a better fit somewhere else in the community. So we just want to be careful of those options, because just because one group didn't like it doesn't mean it wouldn't be a good program for another fit somewhere else in the community.
Yeah, I think the conditional funding is actually it'll be a good tool to have I think one of the requirements, obviously one of the criteria is that it benefits Norwood, right? And so a lot of the ones we got last year were didn't take place in Norwood, or they didn't have a partnership yet. So obviously, those are big. So I think that this is a good, this has gotten us kind of where we need to be. We're going to have another meeting before we start voting even. So I guess we'll know more then. Maybe what we can aim for is for the next meeting to look at a model document and talk about how we'll walk through that, just so again, the process can be as smooth as possible, and we can talk about more scenarios that could potentially happen. Maybe we'll have some more applications that we can start to look at as well. Just wanted to say Mary Paz has probably got a conflict of interest, but I will just quickly tell you guys that I don't know, at the Winsmith Mills, there was a fire recently last week, and it resulted in.
Let me tell people what's the latest news on that and stuff.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. I'm sure you saw it in the news about the little fire. And so what happened was that the fire department decided they did they went and inspected it after that because they had so much trouble getting the hose in there. And the place is a maze. If any of you've gone over there shopping, it can be difficult, and especially in Building 26. So they discovered numerous violations, which any of us tenants could have told them that they were there, and decided that the building had to be shut down until all the repairs were made. So we were given Friday and Saturday from I think 7:30 to 6:30 to get what we wanted out of there. I worked all day Friday, and I had to skip work on Saturday, which meant lost pay and in trouble with Amazon. We had all these buildings, 23 through 26, all the stores, all the people, one loading dock, one freight elevator. It was absolute hell. It was chaos. I managed to get all that I could in my car. I went shopping tonight for groceries, and I had trouble trying to figure out where to put them in my car because I can't take things out of my car because I don't know where I'm going to put my things. So the latest is that the tenants all begged for more time, and this weekend, Friday and Saturday, I think maybe Sunday, we're given additional time to go in and get more things out of there because some of those shops have thousands and thousands of items, and they have out-of-state vendors who sell through them who couldn't make it here, on the weekend. So, and I left furniture there and some large paintings that couldn't fit in my car. It's a mess. I had to apply for a leave of absence, and Amazon will only give it to you if it's a 15-day minimum. So I'll be going for 15 or 2 weeks without pay because that's the way it is. So this is not just my story, but this is a story with a lot of the other artists and artisans and business people there that we were just taken basically by surprise. Like I said, not really. I've got documentation about asking for lit fire exit signs that never got put in. So we all have issues with the management, but this is put an extreme hardship on the tenants. And I don't think any of the news stories have really taken up that aspect of the story about what's done to our lives. So that's any other questions, but that's it.
Yeah, it's a huge amount of people that were impacted. You guys, this is where we had our reception, of course, and it was a great venue. And the Norwood Arts Association is, you're not the only one. Here's another good, I'm on a live meeting, baby. I love you. Good night. Yeah, here, sorry. What was I saying? So I'm super distracted because she went the other way. She didn't go out.
Well,
the door.
Ellen Little shared with us. The tenants have been talking. We've got this thing going on. We're sharing information, and Ellen Little pointed out that she hasn't been to that site on a weekend since March, since the COVID, because she's older. She's at high risk, so she's only gone there during the week when the shops aren't open. So she was forced on Friday and Saturday to go there, putting herself and her health at risk when they were hundreds of people there. My the artist to the one side of me, somebody walked in and stole her tool bag that had drills and tools and money and her watch, because there was no, you know, it was just chaos. You know, you're trying to get things out of your studio, and there's nobody overseeing it.
So one of the things that came up was potentially opening up, you know, conveying our grant application cycle to these folks. The timing of that would be really tricky because our grant cycle is not going to be complete until much later. Obviously, it sounds like there are storage and rent, you know, displacement financial implications for a lot of people. What we know is that not everyone there lives in Norwood necessarily, but we do know that as an artistic center, it's one of very few places in Norwood that facilitates that. And so as a cultural council, I think, you know, I'm wondering what you guys think about, you know, the value of that, and if there are ways that we think that we might reach out a hand. I don't know what we can do at this stage of things. We didn't make a lot of traction with our own fundraising, again, because of our own goals being interrupted. Any ideas or thoughts about this?
Giddy, I
And
just,
for the record, I just want to say that I'm not going to apply, just so you'll know.
Giddy, I have just a point to say. Like, we could support this artist group through a program which the Cultural Council is having, that is Cultural Facilities Fund. I just attended a session last week on this, and we could definitely look more into these details and see how we could help the artists, because even this art and culture comes under the banner of culture, and there's, I think so, there's a huge scope we could fund this situation. Like,
I saw something about that. I didn't look into it because I was trying to get all of the things in ducks in a row for our meeting, but I'll look at that. So is that similar situations where people are struggling right now, and so there's these other.
this is about the funding, that if you are interested to have some you know, particular artist set up, or some, like for example, this Acton has done a Discovery Museum for kids, so they have to present all the programs and all these things. So there are different various options through which it can be covered. So we have to definitely deep into that how our situation with this. But I think so this cultural facilities funding could help us in supporting this artist group in Norwood by Cultural Council.
Okay, great. I'll look into that.
Also, another thought, if we wanted to have a more immediate impact, just hearing your story, Mary Paz, gave me this idea that we can take any amount of funding. So we have in discretionary money, I think I said like $3,400 or $3,600. We could take, you know, say $1,000 of that and offer for those artists to apply for storage fees for their equipment until repairs can be done. And that can be a more immediate thing. It would just require an application. And then depending on how many applications we receive, is how much money we can give out. If we allocate, say, $1,000 of our money and we get 10 applications, then we can give each person $100, and that would, you know, do 2 months of a small storage unit. We could do something like that. We could also, if we wanted to try to allocate more money, put something out to the community on our social media outlets saying if they wanted to donate to this cause to help the artists, that would just increase the amount of money we'd be able to give out. So that's something that could be put together relatively quickly. All it would require is an application and to get the applications out to the artist. And for us to decide if we wanted to do something like that and if there was any funding. And that's just one idea. It could be helping them with any amount, any purpose that we can come up with.
How do
I
others
think
feel
there are
about
only
that?
about 18 artists or so in the those buildings. And actually, I'm pretty sure that they're all someplace within 23 to 26. But I'm not sure if any of them are in the L, the part that comes out to the, I'd have to ask the artist. And I'm sorry, I haven't had a chance, Kate, to send you the list of emails of the artists with whom I've communicated in the past. So, but and some of them may have already just gone to another location. I don't know. So I don't know that in other words, that you would get actually 18 applications. And like I said, I wouldn't hit you guys up because I'm part of the council and I feel like my job is to help the others. So
What do we know about who owns that building?
he's a lawyer in the Boston area. He's totally clueless, stingy, and we're not even sure he's going to go ahead and make these repairs or if he'll decide to go ahead and just turn the building into condos or whatever. None of us are very optimistic about ever getting back in there again.
Yeah, I didn't want to be the one to say it. I'm glad you, but my entire life has been like watching these kinds of buildings, something small happen and that's it. It's over. I've never seen a building like that come back from something like this.
Yeah, no, it won't. And I'm just amazed that he's gone under the radar for so long. And I'm kind of mad at myself for not contacting the fire department when they wouldn't put in the fire signs. And I did get them to give us a functioning fire exit door because I could not open the one. But at least we have stairs. I heard that there are some doors that there aren't any stairs. So if you open the door, you just fall to the ground, I guess.
So I love the idea of trying to find them storage places, temporarily, or I don't even know. It's probably too immediate to help people move, right? Like the cost to like rent a truck to move your stuff out of there or whatever. But anything we do is going to be temporary for sure.
Yeah, no, that's sure. I'm not sure what all the artists have done. I know some, like I said, I know one has already gone over to the Space Center. She's rented a space because she's works professionally and she, has ongoing projects. I have a commission that I'm in the middle of and I'm just going to have to work at home, I guess. But yeah, I think that, I don't know, Kate, would you want to just, if I gave you the list of names, if people vote and agree that you could put out a proposal? I think it should be very concrete, like $100 or $200 towards your storage, because some people may only want to store a month. I mean, most of them can't go without their supplies. I can't put my stuff in storage. I need to get a workspace.
I'm this is tricky because if we want to support Norwood artists, but it sounds like some of these folks might kind of disappear from us. And if that's the case, I don't know if it's responsible for us to spend council money in that direction. In like an ideal world, we could help fund a new space, or like find space. But that's all very, I think to Shalandra and Chris's point, maybe what we could do is on this application, create a question about residency. And so if they are Norwood artists, that would mean something. Or if they were moving to, if they could say that they were moving to another location in Norwood,
I
then
was
we
thinking
could
like a deposit on a new space in the Space Center or something like that. They could.
Oh man, that is so expensive there.
I don't know anything.
I'm afraid I'm gonna have to go talk to them about it, but I know that from what I hear, I would get a space that's probably less than half of the size I have now for more than double the rent.
Yeah.
So I can't afford that.
They have fire exits.
Oh, they have air conditioning, they have heating, and they also have cubicles. You work in these
Yeah, which
little
pay for it.
cubicles. So I'm
Yeah.
sorry, it's like, wow. I mean, I'd probably work at home if I had to do that. Just not have a bedroom anymore. So,
Well, I guess I
Also-
mean, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, we could also decide, like, if it's not storage, if it's, money towards rent or something like that. It doesn't have to be, I just thought of storage because I knew that was something that was like in the range of $25-50 for a small unit, depending on how much space they needed. And we can, we can allocate whatever it is. It can be for Norwood residents, or if you said this woman who is in the Space Center runs her business out of Norwood,
Yeah.
she, is, a Norwood business owner. It could be, we can be as flexible or as rigid as we want because it's discretionary money. So.
how about I propose something really totally off the wall, because I'm good at that. What if we concentrate more on promoting and encouraging the town and the board to work towards finding spaces for artists, affordable spaces. Our efforts, and rather than the money, because probably most people have already paid their deposits or made arrangements because we had to get the heck out of there. But what if that was our flag bearing kind of thing, is to say, hey, we're really serious about artists. Artists can't afford to even work in here,
Yeah.
I mean, over the Space Center, they've got a lot of people, working together in a small space. And a lot of them, some of the people are wealthy or have wealthy husbands or wives, but it's, I just think it's a shame that there aren't any options, really. So when one shuts down, man, there you go.
Right. And it's very common for studios to be in those kinds of older buildings, but they have to be safe. And
Mhm.
so that's where let's see. I like
I mean,
that
I love
idea.
my studios,
I mean, I
big
think that's-
windows, big. And
What's that?
I said, I love my studio. It's good size and big windows, and
Yeah.
I mean,
I think that's a good long-term goal, to have more, to advocate for that. Right now, I'm trying to think what the best next step is. And before you suggested that, I was going to say, what would make the council comfortable to do a quick subcommittee that could create an application process that would be responsive in a quick turnaround time. What could we land on where we could vote and say, okay, these 3 people write the application? And because it sounds like we need to know more about who the artists were and that they're not that many. So, and it also seems like a very short-term fix, whereas what you're suggesting, Mary Paz, is more of an exploratory, long-term, very worthy goal, where not only would we cultivate space for artists to come, but it reaches our goal of, or it is to the end of our goal of cultivating more artists, right? So that there's more programming.
well, would it make sense for me to put out a feeler to the artists and ask them what building they're in? Were they impacted? And not say anything about dollars, just say that we're considering trying to figure out a way to help. Or would you prefer it coming from you because you're the co-chair? I cannot think of too many people there who live in Norwood, frankly, besides me.
Right.
And then
I'd like
with
to hear
Ellen
from
Mills,
others. I'd like to hear from everybody else.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how to approach this
I think because our funds are so limited, our reach becomes really limited. I think where we are powerful is we have the ability to communicate to the people in the town. Windsmith Marketplace is a huge commerce
Right.
draw to Norwood. It's an unbelievable way of showcasing all the great things in Norwood. Anytime you go there, there are people from out of state that are there. There are people from all kinds of towns around. It would be a horrible shame to not figure out how to redo that. That I think the fact that the town hasn't or maybe they have behind the scenes been looking at some way of rebuilding it or finding a place to make it happen again. I think it would be a huge lost opportunity. I mean, it's such a feather in our cap. I mean, I can't even tell you how many times I
Yeah.
have, friends that come down and we just go there for the day and shop from,
Yeah.
from other towns because there's so many great things there. So I don't know what we do, but I don't know if it's maybe just doing something like a campaign to try to get the people in town. Maybe they could use the mansion. The Forbes mansion could be a nice use, wouldn't it, of a beautiful old building
Oh my
It's-
God.
sitting empty.
Yeah.
I mean, it's up to code, certainly.
Yeah.
Well, that's two different things though. That's one is the antique shops and furniture shops and the secondhand places, and then there's the working artists and artisans and the offices.
But they've all been shut down, right? Mary
Yeah.
Beth?
Yeah,
Yep.
because we're there 7 days a week, and the weekends are just when the shops are open, and the town can't do much. All they can do is tell the owner what he needs to do, and right now it seems like he's just in a denial. I mean, I don't think he I mean, if he's put pressure on, there was a roof leak in the studios across from me, thank God not mine, that ruined papers and artwork. It took them
Oh.
a year to fix that leak. The artist had to move out. No, they're not about to. He's not. It's going to be hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of, I would imagine.
Well, I think
With
Denise
spaces
has
like
me.
that- Sorry, go ahead, Kate.
No, you go ahead.
I mean, with spaces like that, like you can't have your cake and eat it too. The only reason the Winsmith Mills is the Winsmith Mills is because you can get a ton of space for cheap because it's not up to code, right?
Right.
Once it's up to code, you get the Space Center, which is already at like a fraction of its occupancy, right? Because it's expensive, right?
Right.
And they
Yeah, and it's horrible. But the thing though, Chris, is
the
that
fire code's being poor, right? It's like
Right.
well, I think that it was up to code probably initially, but then they started getting greedy and dividing spaces and making all these things, and that's what happened. I think I suppose if they went in and just tore down some walls and I mean maybe that, but I still cannot see them doing it. I mean, I know the shops are great, but have you ever tried to get like from one room to another? You get lost. If there had been a fire, I probably would have been burned to death because I could never figure out how to get the heck out of there. All the little dead ends and stuff. So, which were wonderful. They were cute. I don't know, Chris. I think that's that's a good thing. I mean, we artists are used to working in these conditions.
Yeah.
but
Right.
I don't want to go up in flames. Okay.
and that's the constant balance in this world, right? It's like the safety concern versus the actual affordability of it, right? And like you
Yeah.
it's hard to find a space with both.
Yeah, I think the ones in SOA are probably not quite as expensive as the Space Center. I don't know, but for me, that would be a commute, to go into South Boston, to work. So,
Denise-
There's plenty of places like that in Providence that have had their share of a
Mhm.
revival. It's a little bit of a
I
drive,
think,
but
I think Lawrence, not Lawrence, Lowell, I think, and a couple of other cities have been really renovating and attracting artists and doing loft situations that are affordable. But again, it's a trade-off, the commute. And if I only have a few hours, I can't spend, 2 of it driving. So,
Well, I would imagine, Denise has me thinking too that this is worth advocacy and sort of more conversations because I know that Norwood's looking at lots of different mixed use zoning in different areas. And, we've got a really great town planner. And I'm sure that if we can raise this in a way and start the conversation, we could either, we could learn more about what conversations are being had around it. We could make the case as to why this kind of building is valuable and necessary for a thriving culture in a town or in a city. And we could then, sort of just see what's going on related to this. We could maybe do that in the way of drafting a letter that we all sign off on. We could invite some town officials to our meeting and have them talk to us after we form some questions. Do you guys think a good next step would be like a subcommittee on this? Like sort of like, I don't know what we call it, but
Well, researching possibilities. I mean, I've looked at all the empty storefronts and I'm thinking, why can't artists be working in there? You know, why can't they
yeah.
have a pop-up gallery? You know, make use of it. But would that then be on the onus of the building owner, or would the town support that? So I don't
Well,
know.
yeah, because what you've got the ultimate thing is it's the finances of it, right? Like it
Mhm.
goes away once finances come into it. Usually these places are most successful, I think, like the ones you were talking about in Providence, when there is a town backing, when there's sort of a public investment. And so that's tricky, right? That's a big deal. And so with everything else going on, this is a really long-term, you know, type of goal or project. But you know, those are the ones that are worth it, right? Like if we care about it, then and we, you know, we could start the conversation, certainly.
Well, I meant it as a long term. I didn't think it would get solved, excuse me,
Oh,
in 2
no.
months or something. But I just thought that could be part of our mission, to, you know, to help find and support,
Yeah.
you know, encourage the town to, you know, people say it's a sports town, but I mean, that people are interested in culture too, and the arts. So
Right.
I was just thinking, I mean, you'd have to start really small, right? Like a community center in one of the empty storefronts in town,
mhm.
right? Like what could you make happen in a space like that? You know, you include maybe an artist studio or two, space for like a youth program, right? Then there's grant opportunities there for like funding a youth program or whatever.
And that's
But
post COVID though. That's post
yeah,
COVID.
yeah, right. You know, yeah. I mean, but I think the road is to this is paved with like starting very, very, very small.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, the other thing too is I'm thinking that if we advertise this kind of stuff, there could be some business owners who could look and say, you know, I'm not using that 300-400 square feet in the back there. You know, I can get those boxes out and, you know, rent to an artist. I mean, maybe we'd get people in the community thinking about the space they have that they could offer, you know. I mean, it's always great to work in a building with other artists, but at this point we take what we could get, you know. So but I don't know, I just think that would be, if people understood how difficult it is to find a space to work in, and that's safe.
Yeah,
and how
and
costly,
I
that
noticed,
maybe they'll start being more creative and like, you know.
and on our survey that we did 2 summers ago, we got a lot of feedback, or more than, you know, quite a bit of feedback that spoke to this. So there are people who are looking for it, maker spaces. I think I remember it coming up. So the key is like finding the right connections and people that want to work on it and, you know, sort of put a stake in it. I think.
Hey, maybe Ernie Jr. will give us his back showroom.
There you go. Okay, we can always ask. Why don't we? I mean, the only thing I can think of is to sort of continue this conversation is to do sort of a subcommittee situation. That would maybe need to, you know, to find out more, to do some research, and then. But in terms of Winsmith, do you guys think it's worth reaching out to the artists that are being displaced and finding out a little bit more about their situations? And then if there's some discretionary funds where we could help someone in Norwood, you know, that we could bring that back to the council. Okay. So, Mary Paz, if it's more comfortable for me to reach out or you, I think.
Well, I just didn't want to step on your toes. I mean, I just thought,
Oh, no.
since I've you know, I've already, you know, been in contact with these people, that I could just throw that question out there, you know.
Yeah, if you could just say, like, if, you know, find out who's either living in Norwood or plans to stay in Norwood,
Mhm.
I think, anything else, you guys, that I'm not thinking of? That we would want
I
to
know
know?
that one of the people who was going to apply for a grant, I don't know that she still is, a weaver. And so she may be more local. I don't know. I think that's when I questioned you about if she has created an LLC for herself, can she still apply for a grant? So, but she's herself. She's not like a big business.
I think so, because Shalon, do you know that's the answer to that? LLCs, I mean, artists have LLCs, right? Like they can apply to grants. Is that true? Or is there?
Yeah, they can apply to grants. If they don't have an actual EIN, they can apply using their social security number for the W-9.
Okay, great. I'll tell her. Thank you.
Okay. Does anyone else have any addendum to any further addenda for this meeting?
Okay, just a quick question about the funding that we're talking about to these potential artists who are displaced. Do we need to have an amount set aside ahead of time and tell MCC that we're using X number of dollars for our own granting program?
Or should
No,
we
this
find
would
out
be,
what the need is before we determine an amount?
yeah, we can find out what the need is first before we decide on any funding. If we want to do funding at all. And this money is coming from discretionary money, so it doesn't have to do with MCC at all.
Great, thanks.
Question. All right. Thank you all very much. So let's talk about dates. December 7th, 7 p.m. Monday is our next meeting where we can see what the latest is, the latest and greatest. But we'll have the template of how we'll go through the grants and the categories and the criterion checkboxes and respond to that. And then January 4th is a Monday. That would be a voting meeting. And February 1st is a voting meeting, with the final February 13th being rejections needing to be notified by that date. So, oh, I lost my train of thought. Sorry. I hate that when that happens. As the applications are coming in, you guys got information. You can actually see what's happening in our packet. What's it called? Panel book. So not a lot is happening over there right now, but definitely take a look on that January, before our next few meetings, even our next meeting as well, in case there's anything that would raise questions that would be relevant to before we really get into the meeting of the meat of the voting, if you don't mind. And if you guys have any questions, I know we get a lot of emails and a lot of buried links and buried passwords. So sometimes on my crazy days, I have to, dig them out. So if anybody needs any help digging stuff out, let me know. I can help do that. And I think that's it for tonight. We're going to follow up with the artists at the Winsmith and just see who's who, kind of what the situation is. And then I think it's okay for open meeting law if I just do an email to say who would want to be in a subcommittee about long-term artist placement, facilitation, facilities, that sort of thing. Maybe
I
it
would
links back
prefer.
to what Arati had offered too, like facilities funding. Maybe this is connected to that in terms of space. So let's all look for that link too. If that's on the Mass Cultural page. Okay. The Cultural Facilities Funding Program. So maybe that will open up some light bulbs too, in terms of this conversation that we just had.
Great.
Anybody have anything else? Okay. Oh, and Amy, we're gonna let people know. Oh, sorry. We got to put a button on the priorities. Are we okay to leave the slides as is with mentioning our priorities and with the sort of overlay of COVID, saying like, we will also consider this, or do we need to specify that anymore? Clarify it anymore? maybe what we can do, Amy, when we email people to say the dates have changed, to remind them, to alert them to that, to say, please be aware, take note that given COVID, we are considering beyond just our, initial priorities. So if you, I think we should specify to make the case of, how COVID has impacted you or why you're applying if it's outside of our normal priorities. So we're going to do that. We're going to let people know that the dates are extended, and I'll update social media as well. All right, guys. Thank you all so much.
Thank you. Night.
Have a good night. See ya next
Bye.
time.
Thanks, Kate. Thanks, everyone. Good night.